Joining us now with more on the implications of declassifying this historic attack is Knesset member and opposition leader Isaac Herzog. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so what I'd like to first discuss is what you find the most interesting about the decision to declassify this mission now. What does the timing of this revelation say to you?
The timing came in connection with Ehud Olmert's biography, the previous prime minister who came out with a biography. There was pressure from the Israeli media. There were a lot of journalists who came forward and demanded to lift the gag or the ban that was on this story. We were signed, I was a member of the Security Cabinet. In that decision, I voted in favor, yay. And we were sworn into full secrecy. And that is why only after the secrecy was lifted, partially, this story is out.
Well, and it seems like there's so many people who are very excited to kind of tell this tale, but the timing is interesting. Was this, message released to essentially speak to the enemies and say this is what could happen?
No, I don't think so. I must say clearly, it's not a message to the enemy. It came out of internal Israeli demands. We are an open, free society, democracy. The press is very strong here. The press demanded to reveal the story. There was an article by David Makovsky in the New Yorker back in 2012, which made a lot of headlines. They wanted to follow up on it. But now that Ehud Olmert wrote a chapter about it in his memoirs, in his book, there was pressure to lift some of the ban, and that is why it came out now.
Interesting. Now, the question here is, if you're saying that obviously this isn't a message to be sent to enemies, although it
could be interpreted as a message to the enemy. Look, it is clear to us that many of our neighbors have dreams of nuclear capabilities. It is clear, it's been there for decades old. It is clear that it wasn't only Syria, there were others. We knew about Libya.
Well, do you think this is going to impact any policy on the ground, having heard a story like this and this being something that is now public, especially in terms of public support for moving in?
Look, each case according to its merits. And we know what we're talking about. There is one major enemy in the region, that's Iran. And we know that Iran is working to develop nuclear capabilities. But let's put it that way, not necessarily do you compare one to the other. There are circumstances. Clearly, we object vehemently to any capability or possibility that Iran will have nuclear capability. And by the way, all our neighbors, Sunni states, think alike.
Has there been any international backlash to kind of the revealing of this story and the revealing of Israel's role?
Not necessarily. We're talking about an event that took place 12 years ago.
Right.
Or let's say 11 years ago. And we know that this event was known already to the international community. People studied it. What we know now is, of course, that Bashar al-Assad lied to the world, cooperated with North Korea in developing nuclear capability, and no one holds us to commit to the fact that none of our neighbors are not doing the same right this moment.
Right.
And that's why we should be very cautious, because the introduction of such capability to the region is very dangerous. Israel has undertaken always not to be the first one to introduce weapons of this kind to the region. And we have to make sure that we are not faced with enemies with such capabilities.
Well, that brings us back to the issue of Iran again. The main issue always, is Israel capable but also willing to go in on the ground to Iran and carry out something similar to this attack?
Look, the last thing we need is bragging. So I don't intend to brag on anything. All I say is that we have a very strong Air Force, one of the best in the world. We have great capabilities. We are state-of-the-art technology. This nation is one of the greatest in the world in cyber and security and technology and the like. And let's leave it at that. One can guess. I think in this circumstance, we've shown incredible capabilities and also good decision-making process, which I'm proud to have been part of.
Well, it's going to be interesting, obviously, to see what happens with the Iran nuclear deal and kind of what the plan would then be if there is no deal in place.
But that's also not an issue only for Israel. That's an issue for the entire world. It's an issue for the international community. It's an issue for the United States. It's an issue for Europe, which should be worried about possible missile development by Iran, which reaches all the way to London and Paris and Berlin. So, you know, this is not only an Israeli issue. One should be very cautious in making it only a single point Israeli issue.
Right.
The nuclear reactor in Syria was an Israeli issue and
Right.
was brought up to the US President George W. Bush, and he convened the National Security Council, and they recommended that America doesn't take a role in such an attack, and Israel was left alone to make its decision and followed the rules that have always applied to Israel's security from day one. We take our security in our hands.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Knesset member and opposition leader Isaac Herzog.
Thank you. All the best.